The observation blister of the Coalition vessel Unseen Hand was a sphere of polished glass and sensor vanes, hanging in the shadow of Jupiter's magnetosphere. From this distance, Sol was a bright coin, smaller than a thumbnail, and the blue marble of Earth was an almost invisible speck of reflected light. Grand Strategist Vex Core pressed his four-fingered hand against the transparency and watched the human homeworld through a series of layered optical filters. 312 standard cycles of war. The Coalition and the Krell Ascendancy had burned through 100 star systems, shattered 17 biospheres, and spent the lives of billions. And through it all, this one species, these humans, had simply traded, sold medical supplies to both sides, exchanged cultural data, hosted diplomatic mixers. They were friendly, soft-voiced bipeds from a garden world with remarkably unremarkable gravity. Coalition intelligence had filed 37 separate reports on them, each one concluding the same thing: Tier 4, pre-warp adjacent, no significant military threat. Vex Core's mandibles clicked together in what his species used as a frown. He had always found those reports suspiciously tidy. Strategist. His communications adjutant, a younger officer named Pythra, turned from her console. Her feathers were flared in alarm. Priority signal from the Krell front. The 14th Splinter Fleet broke through our coordinate kilos. They made an unscheduled jump. Where? Vex Core asked. Pythra's silence was answer enough. She threw the trajectory plot onto the main display. The jagged red line terminated in a system every Coalition officer had been ordered to avoid. So, the Krell commander, a warlord named Torvak, was known for tactical desperation. His fleet had been decimated. His home nest was glass. He had nothing left to lose, and now he was bearing down on an undefended, neutral world with enough firepower to crack a continental plate. Vex Core felt something cold settle into his thorax. He had been stationed near Jupiter for a reason that High Command had never fully articulated. The humans had simply asked politely that Coalition observation posts remain outside Saturn's orbit. When pressed, their diplomatic delegation had smiled and said it was a matter of traffic management. "Get me a direct line to," Vex Core began. An override signal flooded his console before he could finish. It was unencrypted, broadcast on every frequency. Torvak's voice, translated through the Coalition's standard linguistic matrix, boomed across the bridge. "Human system, you will broadcast your unconditional surrender. Your world will serve as our strategic holding until the Coalition withdraws. Resist, and we will burn your cities to bedrock. You have 1/10th cycle to respond." Vex Core's crew stared at the speakers. Pythra's feathers drooped. 1/10th cycle was not enough time for any response to be meaningful. It was an execution notice dressed in diplomatic language. The strategist raised his wrist communicator to issue an emergency alert to High Command. Before his mandibles could form the first word, every sensor on the Unseen Hand screamed at once. Something on Earth's moon had just powered up. It had been buried under 40 meters of regolith, masked by thermal baffles, invisible to every scan the Coalition had ever devised. Now it was rising. A vast, angular structure, like a spearhead carved from anthracite, pushed up through the dust and rotated on gimbals that shimmered with a lubricant-like coating of active camouflage slewing away. Its barrel was 2 kilometers long. Its power signature didn't register on the standard spectrum, because it wasn't using any energy source the Coalition understood. Pythra whispered, "What is that?" Vex Core had no answer. 3 centuries of military doctrine, 3 centuries of technological progression, and he could not identify what he was looking at. The weapon on the moon fired. A lance of distorted light, warped like heat haze over a winter plain, crossed the distance between Luna and the Krell flagship in less than a heartbeat. There was no explosion, no shield flare, no visible interaction at all. The beam touched the flagship's hull, and the flagship's central reactor simply unspooled. Atomic bonds came apart in a perfect cylinder, 3 meters wide, straight through the core of the vessel. One moment the reactor was there. The next, it was a cloud of inert, cold plasma drifting into the void. The Krell flagship, the fist of retribution, went dark. The 90-second countdown had not yet begun, but the war for Earth already had. Part 2. The silence on the Unseen Hands bridge was absolute. VexCore's sensory fronds detected the subtle vibration of the life support systems, the distant hum of the cloaking field, and the accelerated heartbeat of every crew member within the primary command ring. No one spoke. No one moved. On the main display, the tactical overlay updated in real time. The Krell flagship was dead in space, its core obliterated by a weapon that should not exist. The remaining 36 vessels of Torvak's splinter fleet scattered into evasive patterns, their commanders clearly panicking. Electronic warfare suites came alive, flooding the local space with jamming signals, decoy drones, and false gravimetric signatures. Against any coalition battle group, it would have been an effective countermeasure. The Krell had perfected the art of confusing sensor networks. The human defense grid did not rely on sensor networks as the galaxy understood them. From the Unseen Hands passive observation suite, Pythra called up a spectral analysis of the lunar weapon. The data made no sense. The energy signature wasn't plasma, kinetic, or any form of directed radiation. It was a dimensional shear, a localized tear in the fabric of causality itself, precisely applied. The humans had found a way to unstitch matter at the subatomic level and had weaponized it. "Strategist," Pythra said, her voice carefully controlled, "I'm detecting launch signatures from Earth's orbital shell." VexCore switched his attention to the inner system. The Krell missiles were already away. 12 planet crackers, each one capable of rendering a terrestrial world uninhabitable for 10,000 cycles, streaked toward Earth on fusion drives that painted white-hot trails across the sensor scopes. They were fast, faster than any counter-battery fire could track. Their onboard intelligence systems would weave, dodge, and adapt to any defensive pattern. They never reached the thermosphere. The human mine drones were small, no larger than a personal transport each one. They had been drifting in high orbit, camouflaged as debris from a century of peaceful space development. When the missiles crossed the 3,000-kilometer mark, the mines activated, not with an explosion, not with an intercept. They simply deleted the warheads. One moment, 12 planet-killing missiles were accelerating toward a world of 11 billion people. The next, the missiles were gone. The only evidence they had ever existed was a faint scattering of gamma-ray photons, the ghost scream of annihilated matter, and a sudden, profound stillness in the electromagnetic spectrum. VexCore's mandibles locked. He forced them apart with a conscious effort of will. "Record everything," he ordered. "Every frame, every wavelength, every stray neutrino. I don't want to miss a single detail." The Krell commander, Torvak, clearly had no intention of retreating. His remaining ships, now numbering 31 after the human defense grid began systematically coring them with the lunar cannon, formed into an attack wedge. They were going to punch through, close the distance, and engage at knife-fight range. It was a classic Krell tactic. Their ships were built for close-quarters brutality, their crews genetically enhanced for high-gravity combat. They believed that no species could match them in a brawl. VexCore watched the human ships move to intercept, and he realized that Torvak had made an error so fundamental it bordered on the philosophical. The human vessels were ugly, utilitarian boxes with no aesthetic grace, no sleek lines, no visible weapon ports. They didn't maneuver. They simply positioned themselves in the path of the Krell advance and waited. When the Krell opened fire, their plasma batteries and kinetic slugs struck the human hulls and vanished. Not deflected, not absorbed, vanished. And the human ships grew brighter on the energy scans, feeding on the incoming fire like predators drinking light. "Their hulls," Pythra breathed. "They're converting the attack into usable power. The more we shoot them, the stronger they get." The Krell wedge hit the human line and shattered like glass against a stone floor. Part 3. Vexcor had studied war for his entire adult life. He had dissected the campaigns of 1,000 coalition strategists, memorized the doctrinal manuals of 14 spacefaring civilizations, and written the operational plans that had broken the Krell at the Battle of Thrixos Vale. He understood conflict as a language, a grammar of force and counterforce, thrust and parry, attrition and maneuver. What he was watching was not war. It was a concept for which the coalition had no word. The human defense grid operated with a tempo that was neither fast nor slow. It was methodical. Every shot from the lunar cannon struck a Krell vessel in its exact center of mass, threading through shield harmonics that should have scattered any beam. Every mine drone materialized at precisely the right coordinates to delete a torpedo or a missile. The human box ships, now numbering only 8 against the remaining Krell 22, simply held their positions and absorbed. Pythra had pulled up the internal sensor logs from the Coalition's deep cover intelligence network. She was scrolling through decades of reports, her feathers flattening with each new discovery. Strategist, I'm cross-referencing the human technology against our threat classification database. Her voice was unsteady. The weapon on their moon doesn't match anything in our records. Neither do the mine drones, the hull matrices, or their propulsion systems. But their civilian infrastructure, their public broadcasts, their scientific journals, their military budget disclosures, all of it aligns perfectly with a Tier 4 civilization. Vexcor turned from the display. You're saying they faked it. I'm saying they constructed an entire civilization's outward appearance, maintained it for 300 cycles across tens of thousands of independent media sources, scientific institutions, and government agencies, and never made a single error that our intelligence apparatus could detect. Pythra looked at him. Strategist, that level of operational security doesn't exist. It's not possible. Yet here we are. On the main screen, the Krell fleet had been reduced to 12 ships. They were no longer attacking. They were fleeing or trying to. The human box ships had begun to move, and their movement was wrong. They didn't accelerate. They simply changed position, as if space were a coordinate grid and they were editing their own location. Vexcor's communicator chimed. An intercepted transmission, unencrypted, broadcast from the human flagship UNV Gleipnir to the Krell commander. The voice that emerged was calm, male, speaking flawless Krell trade language with an accent that suggested the speaker had learned it from native-born tutors. Commander Torvak, this is Captain Isaac Voss of the United Earth Defense Forces. You have violated the sovereignty of the Sol system and launched weapons of mass destruction at a civilian population. By the terms of the Terran Accord of 2156, any hostile action against our home system triggers Protocol Mimir. You have 90 seconds to order your surviving crews to abandon ship. We will not fire on escape pods. This is the only warning. Pythra whispered, Protocol Mimir. What in the name of the first nest is Protocol Mimir? Vexcor didn't answer. He was watching Torvak's response on the tactical feed. The Krell commander predictably refused. His remaining ships, their hulls scarred and venting atmosphere, formed into a tight cluster and lit their fusion torches. They were going to ram. A suicide charge designed to overwhelm the human defense line with sheer kinetic mass. The Krell were warriors. They had built an empire on the principle that death in battle was the highest honor. They would rather die than surrender. Captain Voss's voice returned, quieter now, as if speaking to himself rather than his enemy. Acknowledged, Mimir is now in effect. May your gods receive you with the honor you refuse to show us. The Gleipnir deployed something into the void. It was small, no larger than a cargo container, and it broadcast nothing. No energy signature, no emission, no visible light. It simply drifted into the center of the Krell formation and activated. Every Krell ship went silent. Simultaneously. Navigation, weapons, life support, communications. all frozen, their interfaces locked in a recursive data loop that scrolled the same meaningless symbol across every screen. Vex Core watched the human boarding craft launch, and he understood with the clarity of absolute dread that he had been wrong about everything. Part 4. The boarding craft were ugly in the same utilitarian way the human warships were ugly. No streamlining, no visible thruster arrays, no weapon ports. They crossed the distance to the paralyzed Krell vessels in absolute silence and attached themselves to the hulls like parasites finding purchase on a dying host. Vex Core magnified the feed. The human soldiers emerged from their craft in armored EVA suits, their faceplates opaque, their movements economical and precise. They carried weapons that looked like firearms but weren't. The spectral analysis was confused by them, registering traces of dimensional shear similar to the lunar cannon but miniaturized, restrained, scaled for infantry use. "Show me the Krell internal feeds," Vex Core ordered. Pythra shook her head. "I can't. The Scrambler, that's what our systems are calling the device the Gleipnir deployed, it's still active. Every Krell system is locked. I'm amazed their life support is still cycling." "It won't be, not if the humans don't want it to be." The Krell were known throughout the galaxy for their close-quarters combat prowess. Their warrior caste was genetically modified for dense muscle, rapid clotting, and a pain response that converted injury into adrenaline-fueled rage. A single Krell boarding party had been known to capture entire coalition cruisers. Against unmodified humans, the outcome should have been a slaughter. Vex Core watched the first breach team enter the Krell frigate Blood Oath. They moved through the corridors with a synchronization that required no audible communication. Hand signals, body language, predictive positioning. The Krell defenders, those who had managed to arm themselves before the Scrambler locked their armor servos, charged the human formation with the berserker fury that had broken 100 species. The humans didn't flinch, they didn't shout, they didn't rage. They engaged with a cold, almost surgical precision that was far more horrifying than any battle cry. The first Krell warrior, a massive creature whose 4 arms ended in mono-edged blades, lunged at the point human. The human sidestepped, not fast but early, reading the Krell's intent before the warrior had committed to the strike, and placed a single round into the joint between the Krell's helmet and chest plate. The round didn't penetrate. It phased, bypassing the armor entirely, and depositing a microdose of dimensional shear directly into the warrior's central nervous cluster. The Krell dropped, alive but paralyzed, his nervous system temporarily rewritten. Every other engagement followed the same pattern. The Krell attacked with overwhelming force. The humans redirected, neutralized, and moved on. They didn't kill unless absolutely necessary. They didn't mutilate. They didn't celebrate. They cleared each ship deck by deck, compartment by compartment, with the unhurried efficiency of janitors mopping a floor. Pythra's feathers had gone completely flat against her skull. "They're not soldiers," she said quietly. "They're custodians. This is a custodial action." Vex Core thought of the Terran Accord of 2156, the document Captain Voss had referenced. The Coalition had a copy in its diplomatic archives. It was publicly available. 247 pages of dense legal text that every Coalition analyst had dismissed as a bureaucratic curiosity, a species pretending at legal sophistication to mask its military irrelevance. He had never read it, no one had. "Pull up the Terran Accord," he ordered, "now." Pythra's fingers danced across her interface. The document appeared on a secondary display, translated into Coalition Standard. Vex Core skimmed it, his eyes catching on clauses and subclauses that had seemed innocuous when Earth was a harmless backwater. Article 12. Any hostile incursion into the Sol system shall constitute an act of existential aggression, authorizing the unrestricted deployment of the Mimir Protocol. Article 17. Captured enemy combatants shall be detained in extra-dimensional holding facilities for the duration of the conflict, to be repatriated upon cessation of hostilities. Article 23. The United Earth Defense Forces shall maintain, at all times, sufficient capability to neutralize any known or projected threat to the home system, up to and including stellar-scale extinction events. The accord was not a diplomatic document. It was a military doctrine disguised as a legal framework, and it had been sitting in the coalition's public archives for over 2 centuries. The Krell commander, Torvak, was captured on the bridge of his flagship. The human breaching team didn't even need to fire a shot. They simply walked through the blast doors, their dimensional phase units ignoring the meter-thick alloy, and placed Torvak in restraints while he screamed obscenities at them in 3 dialects. The last thing Vex Corps saw before the Krell fleet was scuttled was Captain Voss, standing on the bridge of the Gleipnir, watching the operation unfold with an expression that might have been weariness or pity. Part 5. The scrambler deactivated exactly 4 minutes and 37 seconds after deployment. By then, every surviving Krell crew member had been extracted, processed, and transferred to the human holding vessels that materialized from their hidden anchorages in the asteroid belt. The Krell warships, now empty and drifting, were methodically scuttled by the same mine drones that had deleted their Planet Cracker missiles. Vex Corps watched the scuttling process with the morbid attention of a coroner performing an autopsy. The mines didn't explode. They didn't burn. They simply phased through the Krell hulls, deposited their dimensional shear payloads into the reactors, and left. One by one, the remaining vessels of the 14th Splinter Fleet unspooled into clouds of cold, dead atoms. The unseen hand's tactical computer tallied the engagement metrics and displayed them without commentary. Duration: 11 minutes, 22 seconds from first shot to final scuttle. Krell losses: 37 vessels, all hands captured or neutralized. Human losses: 0 vessels damaged, 0 casualties reported. The entire engagement had been, from the human perspective, a traffic stop. Strategist. Pythra's voice was strained. High Command is requesting an immediate assessment. They detected the dimensional shear signatures from the Kilo's listening post. They want to know if the Krell have deployed a new weapon. Vex Corps turned from the display. The cold thing in his thorax had spread to his limbs. Tell them the Krell are no longer a factor in the Sol theater. Tell them the humans ended the engagement in 11 minutes. And tell them, he paused, choosing his words with the precision of a diplomat who had just realized he was not a diplomat. Tell them our Tier 4 assessment was incorrect, severely incorrect. He began composing his Priority 1 report, while the last Krell debris cooled in the void. The report took him 3 hours to write. He attached every scrap of sensor data: the lunar cannon's dimensional shear beam, the mine drone's instant deletion capability, the box ship's energy conversion matrices, the scrambler's recursive data loop, the breaching team's phase weapons. He included the text of the Terran Accord, with key passages highlighted and annotated. He appended a 17-page analysis of the doctrinal implications. And then, because he was a strategist and strategy required honest conclusions, he added a single-sentence summary at the top of the file. Earth is not a Tier 4 civilization. Earth is a Tier 1 civilization that has maintained a convincing Tier 4 facade for 300 cycles, and we have no theory for why. The response from High Command arrived within the hour. It was, by the standards of coalition bureaucracy, frantic. The Grand Council had convened an emergency session. Every senior strategist in the coalition had been recalled from leave. The Krell Ascendancy, detecting the dimensional shear signatures, had temporarily halted all offensive operations, apparently convinced that the coalition had deployed a superweapon. For the first time in 3 centuries, the galactic war had paused. And the humans, Vex Corps noted, had gone back to their normal lives. The lunar cannon had retracted into its silo. The mine drones had returned to their debris field camouflage. The box ships had disappeared into whatever dimensional pocket they used as a base. The holding vessels were nowhere on any scan. Earth civilian broadcasts continued their normal programming: entertainment, news, sports, weather. He tuned into one of the broadcasts almost at random. A human news anchor was reporting on a diplomatic summit between two of Earth's nation-states, discussing trade agreements and environmental regulations. The lunar cannon was not mentioned. The Krell attack was not mentioned. The complete dismantling of an alien battle fleet was not a news event. It was a Tuesday. Vex Core had never heard the human phrase, a Tuesday, in this context, but if he had, he would have understood. High Command's next message was not a request for further analysis. It was an order. Vex Core was to make direct contact with the United Earth Diplomatic Corps and request, in the most formal terms available, an official audience. The coalition needed to know what they were dealing with. And more importantly, they needed to know if the humans intended to stay neutral. Part 6. The human orbital station was called Geneva High. It was a ring-shaped structure positioned at the L1 Lagrange point between Earth and its moon, close enough to the lunar cannon silo to make the implicit threat unmistakable. Vex Core's shuttle approached with its weapons powered down and its transponder broadcasting diplomatic credentials on every frequency. The docking procedure was automated. Human traffic control guided the shuttle into a berth with polite, unaccented instructions, and when Vex Core stepped onto the station's deck, he was greeted by a human female in a simple blue uniform. No weapons visible, no guards, no visible security of any kind, just a woman with gray-streaked hair and calm, appraising eyes. "Strategist Vex Core," she said. "Welcome to Geneva High. I'm Ambassador Lena Morosova. Thank you for requesting this meeting through formal channels. We appreciate the courtesy." Vex Core's sensory fronds scanned her for any sign of deception or hostility. They found nothing. Her body language was open, her posture relaxed, her expression pleasant. She looked, for all the galaxy, like a mid-level bureaucrat welcoming a visiting trade delegation. "Ambassador," Vex Core said, his translator rendering the coalition formal greeting into human standard. "I am grateful for your willingness to speak with me. The coalition has many questions." "I'm sure you do," Morosova gestured toward a corridor. "I've arranged a private meeting room. I find these conversations go better over a meal. Are you hungry?" The question was so unexpectedly mundane that Vex Core almost laughed. 12 hours earlier, her species had dismantled a Krell battle fleet without taking a single casualty. Now she was asking if he wanted lunch. They walked together through the station's curved corridors. The design aesthetic was clean, functional, and utterly unremarkable. The same muted colors and soft lighting that characterized every human diplomatic facility the coalition had documented. No hidden weapons, no defensive emplacements, no signs of militarization at all. The meeting room was small, furnished with a simple table and 2 chairs. A window looked out onto the curve of Earth, a blue-white crescent against the black of space. Food had been laid out, a selection of coalition-compatible nutrients, clearly researched and prepared in advance. Morosova sat down and poured herself a cup of something steaming. "Tea," she said, nodding his glance. "An herbal infusion, a habit of mine." She took a sip. "Let me spare you the formal preamble, strategist. I know what you're here to ask. The answer is no. Earth does not intend to join the coalition. We will not enter your war against the Krell." Vex Core had expected resistance. He had not expected preemptive refusal. "Ambassador, with the capabilities your species has demonstrated, your intervention could end the conflict within cycles. Billions of lives could be saved." Morosova set her cup down. Her expression remained pleasant, but something behind her eyes shifted. A depth of weary patience that spoke of conversations like this one, repeated across decades or centuries. "Yes," she said. "We could end it. We could end it in an afternoon. Our analysts estimate that a full deployment of the Mimir protocol against both the coalition and the ascendancy would result in the complete neutralization of all active combatant fleets within 18 hours, followed by the systematic detention of all military personnel within 6 standard cycles. The war would be over. The galaxy would be peaceful. Then why? Because then we would own the peace. Morosova's voice was quiet, but it cut through the ambient hum of the station's systems like a blade. And we have no interest in empire, strategist. We learned that lesson a long time ago. On a world that used to be as divided and blood-soaked as your galaxy is now, we fought our wars. We built our weapons. We came very close to extinction more than once, and then we chose to stop. She leaned forward, her fingers laced around her cup. Our technology is not designed for occupation. It is not designed for nation building or counterinsurgency. It is designed for one thing, making sure that anyone who attacks our home dies quickly and cleanly, while we take as many of their people alive as we can. That's the paradox of our doctrine. Maximum lethality in defense. Maximum mercy in victory. Vex KORR processed this. The KRELL prisoners, you're holding them in pocket dimensions. We are. They're being housed in a habitat we constructed specifically for this purpose. It's comfortable. They have food, medical care, recreational facilities. When the war ends, they'll be repatriated. Every single one of them. And if the war doesn't end? Morosova smile was thin. The habitat is self-sustaining. It will outlast both your civilizations. She paused. Strategist, let me be clear. Humanity isn't neutral because we're afraid. We're neutral because we're dangerous. Our weapons don't do limited war. They don't do proportional response. Once we commit, the only outcome is the complete and absolute cessation of hostilities on our terms. And the terms we would impose are not terms either side would accept willingly. Part 7. The conversation continued for another hour. Morosova answered Vex KORR questions with a directness that was, in its own way, more intimidating than any evasion or bluster. She explained the broad principles of dimensional shear technology without revealing the underlying physics. She described the history of the Terran Accord, how it had been drafted in the aftermath of a near-apocalypse that humanity had inflicted on itself, how it had been ratified by every surviving nation-state, how it had governed humanity's approach to the universe for 2 centuries. She did not apologize for the deception. She didn't call it deception. She called it privacy. You came to our borders asking to trade, she said. We said yes. You asked if we had a military. We said yes, but we didn't display it. You assumed that meant our military was weak. That was your assumption, not our lie. You allowed us to believe you were harmless. We allowed you to believe whatever you wanted to believe. The alternative was a demonstration, and demonstrations tend to escalate. She poured herself more tea. We've been watching your war for 300 years, strategist. We've seen the weapons you've deployed. The colony drops, the biosphere burners, the engineered plagues. You and the KRELL have committed atrocities that would make our worst historical tyrants weep with envy. And you've justified every single one of them as necessary for victory. Vex KORR mandibles twitched. The KRELL started. Everyone always says the other side started it. Morosova's voice was tired, not accusatory. It doesn't matter who started it. What matters is that neither of you can stop. Your war has become self-perpetuating. Your economies are built on it. Your political structures require it. Your cultures define themselves by it. You've been fighting so long that peace is more terrifying to you than extinction. The words hit Vex KORR with the force of a physical blow. He had thought similar things in the darkest watches of the night shift, when the casualty reports scrolled past and the faces of the dead blurred into statistics. He had never spoken them aloud. He had never dared. So what do you offer? He asked. If not intervention, then what? Morosova produced a document, a slim folder of actual paper which she slid across the table. Earth's formal proposal, we call it the Sanctuary Initiative. The Sol system and a 30 light-year sphere around it is now a neutral zone. Any warship that enters it from any faction will be met with the same treatment the KRELL received. The crews will be detained. The ships will be scuttled. The war will not be allowed to touch our space. Vex KORR opened the folder. The document inside was dense with legal language, but its meaning was clear. Humanity was drawing a line, not just around its HOMEWORLD, but around an entire region of space that it had apparently colonized or fortified without anyone noticing. The 30 light-year sphere, he said, what's in it? Human settlements, automated defense platforms, early warning arrays. We're not just one world strategist. We haven't been for a long time. We just didn't advertise. How many settlements? Morosova smile was unreadable. Enough. Vex KORR closed the folder. The coalition will not like this. Neither will the KRELL. You're carving a third power out of the middle of the contested zone. We're not a third power. We're a sanctuary. If either side wants to end this war, we'll host the negotiations. We'll guarantee the terms. We'll even enforce them if both parties agree. But we will not fight your battles for you. We will not choose a side. She stood, signaling that the meeting was nearing its end. Tell your High Council that Earth's door is open. We'll trade. We'll talk. We'll even share medical technology, cultural data, scientific research that doesn't have military applications. But our weapons stay on our side of the line, and everyone else's weapons stay out. And if someone tests that line, Morosova picked up her teacup and drained the last of the liquid inside. Then they'll meet Captain VOSS and the GLEIPNIR, and they'll have a very bad day. She set the cup down. Thank you for the conversation, strategist. I hope we can do this again under less dramatic circumstances. Part 8. Vex KORR Quotes shuttle departed Geneva High with the Sanctuary Initiative document secured in a diplomatic pouch, and a sense of vertigo that had nothing to do with orbital mechanics. He spent the journey back to the unseen hand, staring at the STARFIELD through the viewport, watching the scattered debris of the KRELL 14th Splinter Fleet drift in their new, decaying orbits. PYTHRA met him at the airlock. High Command has been sending status requests every 10 minutes. They're getting anxious. They're about to get more anxious. He walked to the bridge and composed his final report with the human document open on a secondary display. The words came slowly, weighted with implications he was still processing. Direct contact established. Human diplomatic representative confirms hostile posture is strictly defensive. New data contradicts all previous assessments of human civilization. Key findings. 1. Human technological base operates on dimensional engineering principles not present in any known scientific framework. 2. Human military doctrine is designed for instantaneous, total neutralization of hostile forces. No concept of proportional response exists in their strategic framework. 3. Humanity is not a single-system species. They have established settlements and defense installations throughout a 30 light-year sphere centered on Sol. Exact extent unknown. 4. They offer neutrality, not alliance. Their terms are absolute. No warships enter their territory. Violators will be engaged and detained. 5. They have offered to host peace negotiations and guarantee any resulting treaty. They have not offered to fight our war. He attached Morosova Quotes document, the annotated sensor logs, and a revised threat assessment that reclassified Earth as a Tier 1 civilization with Tier 0 weaponry, a designation that had not existed before and that he had been forced to invent. The response from High Command was not what he expected. It arrived in the form of a direct, real-time communication from the Grand Council Speaker herself, a rare honor usually reserved for fleet admirals and planetary governors. The speaker's holographic face appeared above the unseen hand's main console, her expression unreadable. Strategist Vex KORR, we have reviewed your report. We have also received an identical copy of the Sanctuary Initiative from the Human Embassy on the Coalition HOMEWORLD. It was delivered by courier 20 minutes ago, along with a basket of fruit and a handwritten note from Ambassador Morosova thanking us for our cooperation. The speaker paused. The Human Embassy has been on the HOMEWORLD for 200 years. We did not know they had dimensional phase capabilities. The ambassador delivered the document by walking through the outer wall of the council chamber. Vex KORR Quotes mandibles twitched. They do enjoy making their point. They do. The speaker leaned closer to the recording lens. Our analysts have completed their assessment of the engagement footage. Their conclusion is unanimous. If the humans had chosen to intervene on either side of this conflict, that side would have won within a standard cycle. The only reason the war continues is because they have allowed it to continue. She was silent for a moment. That is a difficult thing to accept, but it is the truth. What are your orders, Speaker? Maintain your observation post. Continue monitoring. If the humans will not fight for us, we will at least learn from them, study their methods, study their restraint. Perhaps, she stopped, and when she spoke again, her voice had lost its political smoothness. Perhaps we have been waging the wrong kind of war, strategist. Perhaps the humans understood something we forgot. The transmission ended. The holographic face flickered and disappeared. Vex Core sat in the dim light of the bridge, the blue-white crescent of Earth visible on a secondary display. The human news broadcasts continued their steady, unremarkable programming. The lunar cannon was buried again. The mine drones drifted in their debris field camouflage. Somewhere, in a pocket dimension invisible to every sensor the Coalition possessed, 9,000 Krell prisoners were eating, sleeping, and waiting for a war to end that might outlast their natural lifespans. He thought about Ambassador Morosova, drinking her tea and speaking of humanity's self-inflicted near-apocalypse. He thought about the Terran Accord, drafted in the ashes of whatever catastrophe had taught humanity the cost of war. He thought about the patience required to build a civilization that could end a galaxy-spanning conflict in 18 hours, and then choose not to. The humans were not a sleeping giant. They were an awake one, fully aware of its power, choosing restraint not out of weakness but out of hard-won wisdom. They had looked into the abyss of their own destruction and learned something the Coalition and the Krell had forgotten in 3 centuries of mutual slaughter. That victory was not the same as peace, and peace required the courage to stop fighting before the other side was destroyed. Vex Core pulled up the tactical display and marked the boundaries of the new human sanctuary on the star charts. A 30-light-year sphere, centered on a small yellow star in a spiral arm's outer reaches. It was not, he realized, a border. It was an invitation, a proof of concept, a demonstration that another way was possible if either side had the wisdom to accept it. The war would continue. The Coalition and the Krell would keep burning worlds and spending lives. But now there was a line, and beyond that line, a species that had chosen mercy over victory. Vex Core filed his final report and watched Earth turn beneath its thin white clouds, a small blue world full of dangerous, patient, merciful predators. And he wondered if his own people would ever learn to be the same.